Hello, Wrestle Buddies. Welcome again to another Journey of a Wrestler. My name is Dan, originally of the Speech in my podcast, and I am joined by the ever amazing Billie Starkz for this latest series. Billie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I think it's so cool to have these opportunities to talk about these progressions, and I think for a lot of people seeing the way that you've risen on the scene right now really sets a good path for kind of what the independent scene can do right now.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree with that. Like, the independents have grown so much over the past few years where, like, you don't need to go to bigger companies anymore. You can live off the independents as a wrestler, and the independent scene is so great right now.
Absolutely. When we're here and we're talking about this journey, I think there's no better place to start with a journey than the start. And I really want to have a look at some of that aspects of before even debuting, that kind of side of it. Because I feel like a lot of people don't get to see that side or really know about it unless you're one of those people that's gotten to do wrestling training yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So really I want to start off with just saying, like, how long were you training for before having your first match?
So I only trained about 6 months before my first match, which is a very short time compared to a lot of other people that I've known. And it was very strange for me because I'm like, I don't feel ready yet. And I felt like I was just thrown out there, and luckily it was on my trainee show. So my teachers are like, the best way to learn is with practice. So here we're gonna put you in front of people. Have fun.
They just give you the straight up, you're going to learn by doing. Just whatever happens out there is what happens. It's okay, everyone. Just some slight technical difficulties. Yeah, so they hit you with the kind of, you're going to just learn
He's
by
frozen.
doing.
We're back.
Yeah.
I got completely off track.
Don't worry about it. No, so it's like you're just kind of getting thrown in there. You just got to learn by just pure experience and just kind of seeing what works.
And I honestly think it was great for me because being there, I felt like I had to learn faster. And it was a fun way of learning because you could see how people react to certain things. Because I feel like during training, sometimes you're just like going through the motions, but actually being in front of people, you're like, oh, this is my time to show out and entertain.
Yeah. I think it's one of those big things that when we talk about wrestling and what goes into it is like you often have these ideas of like, oh, I'll train this idea and it'll be great, and then you go out there, do it in front of people, and it just gets nothing that you expected.
Yeah. I think that's like so funny because there's been so many times where I'm like, oh, in my head, this is what's going to happen. And then for some reason, crowds are just like, nope, watch this. This is what we think should happen. And it's like, I think wrestling's so entertaining in that way because the wrestler has somewhat control, but you can't control how other people are going to feel. And every crowd's different. Every person's different that's watching wrestling. They have a different taste. And my goal in wrestling is to give everybody a show.
Absolutely. And I think like what you were saying there, like being able to like react as things are happening, just kind of see how things go, and then just be like, okay, well, they didn't like this, but maybe we can try this, and this might get the reaction that I want. So then kind of going on with that, that learning by doing kind of attitude and going through that first match, for those first couple matches that you were kind of going through, starting to build that experience, what were some of like the really early lessons that you got from just being out there, just wrestling, just being in front of people?
Definitely just always thinking, like in wrestling, people have to think so much on the fly, and react to what's going on, because you can't plan for outside factors such as fans or, oh no, this part of the ring is messed up and this. And I learned that very, very quickly. Also, my first match was like a triple threat, which it's very hard in wrestling to do triple threats alone for a first match. And then my trainers gave me a lot of trust and were like, here, we're going to plug you into a storyline. And I was like, so I have to think about this story while doing my match. And it definitely helped me a lot with psychology very early on. Just learning, like, think about all the moving parts and give respect to all of them. Don't focus on one part of your match and make that your set in stone. There's so many other avenues that you have to think about.
Yeah, just not having that, like, that single track of like,
Yes.
oh, okay, well, this is where I want to go to, so we're just gonna get there. Being able to be like, okay, well, there's these things happening and this is going on around me, let alone managing a triple threat on top of that.
And it was also strange. So I injured my ankle during my first match, and I had to learn how to, like, work through injury. And I feel like a lot of people don't like this about me, but it's like something that stuck with me. So I've, like, injured my ankle and worked through it in my very first match, because I was like, I'm not going to just, like, tap out now. I want to finish this. This is my first one. I got to make it okay. And then, like, I've been injured or, like, tweaked stuff, but nothing, like, too serious. But during the Indie Collective, I did a dive and I didn't get caught and just hit the concrete. And in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm okay, because I've been hit in the head before and seen stars, and I'm like, oh, crap, I'm not okay. But I was seeing fine. I knew where I was. Was like, everything's fine. And then everybody surrounded me, and I apparently cracked my head open, had a little dribble of blood going down, and I was like, oh no, this is not good. But I still finished the match, because I was like, I have to finish this match. I'm almost done.
We haven't got long left to go yet, so we can probably wrap this up and I'll be fine.
Yeah, I was like, I can work through this, because I, like, figured out very early on, like, what I can and cannot do with my body, through wrestling, and how to protect myself if, like, something hurts. Okay, I'm gonna stay away from doing these things in my match and work around it. And it's all just been, like, little accident stuff. Like, stuff happens sometimes and you can't control it.
Yeah. I think that thing you said about, like, knowing your body, just knowing your limits is such an important
I've gotten
thing.
that a lot of, like, people are like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And I was like, I promise I'm okay. I know what I'm doing, because this is my body, especially when I took when I did my swanton and I hit the floor. A lot of people were like, what is she doing? Her body, her body. And I was like, I promise I'm taking care of my body. And I literally was walking the next day and was okay. I was, like, a little bit sore.
Yeah,
but it's no different
don't
from, like,
realize
working out or doing football.
Yeah, the preparation and everything that goes into it. I always like to think about the quote from Christopher Daniels, which is like, I won't do anything in minute 1 I can't do in minute 20.
Yes.
That's so awesome. And like you said about just dealing with things like getting injured during a match and just, like, the general way the ring is. We did an interview with someone else before who said they had to work a match where one of the boards underneath the ring kept slipping out of position, so they had to work without one corner of the ring.
Yeah. So my, like, thing, I always, if I get to a show early, I will go check the ring, especially for, like, certain things I do. Like, I've started doing, like, the swanton on the apron. So I always have been checking, like, I will go around every single side of the ring and touch the side to make sure there's nothing sharp poking out, nothing that's going to cut me. And then I've recently ran into troubles with, like, turnbuckles. People don't like to cut off, like, the zip ties right or stuff like that. And I've been cut and I'm like, oh, no.
That is much stronger than I am. The phrase running into properly uncut zip ties.
I'm just like, why are they still here? This sucks. I get so excited when I see a turnbuckle tied with rope. I'm like, oh, I'm in the clear.
So touching back on that training and kind of like you briefly touched on, I want to talk about some of those people that were helping you in those kind of early phases. So who were some of like the key players and trainers and people that you learned from in your kind of early period of wrestling?
So like when I first started wrestling, definitely my trainers were super, super helpful for me. Aaron LaMotta was always like super patient because I feel like people learn different ways. And there was certain things like I would have to take longer than everybody else in my class, but he always took the time to like stop and be like, okay, let's work on this for like a little bit longer. So you have it down and we don't just move on and move past it. And I always appreciated that of like taking time out, even if it wasn't for me, for like other people too. And I always thought that was very special with my training because I've heard like a lot of other people's stories where they're like, oh yeah, they would touch on it once and if we didn't catch on, they would just keep moving and we were stuck trying to figure it out. And I like am very, very thankful for him. And then also Trip Cassidy was one of the people who I feel like opened me up very creatively. And he was like, he always had like great ideas where he's like, what about this? What about this? He could just see a person and could tell them like, this is what you want to do. And it would just click. And he was super creative with everything he did. When he ran Bizarro Lucha, everybody had like a lucha gimmick and like a style, and he would just give people ideas in these storylines, and it was one of like the best promotions that I've been a part of because I would just be so entertained. And my mom's not a big wrestling fan, but she would sit there and she's like, these shows are actually good.
But I think that's awesome. And like you said, people that are working with you, on the technical aspects, but also in the creative aspects and giving you that chance to kind of explore and just learn about what you do and what you want to do. I think there's so much out there right now that it can often be like a little bit overwhelming for people.
Yes. There's so many different like avenues to get into wrestling too. Like mine literally came about because I was taking photos and we were messing with one of the people we knew, Madman Pondo, and he was like, oh, I know a guy who will train you, and I was like, okay. And that's how I kind of like snuck my way in, but everybody has like their own unique way of getting into wrestling. And I always had like this game plan in my head that I was going to go to college and then find a training school near my college and then go to that whenever I didn't have class and then go travel on the weekends. But that's just not how it ended up.
It ended up a completely different way, but still led you in the same path.
Yes.
Who have been some of the people like over the time that you've had your kind of your run now and you've built a bit more experience? Who have been some of the people that you've really had a chance to learn from or be inspired by during that time?
Definitely Trey Miguel. He was one of the people like I would give him some of my ideas and he would just polish them and immediately understand like what I was trying to go for. And he runs a training school up in Ohio called Skull and Bones, and he's just a fantastic trainer, and all of his students that are coming out of there are amazing. And I was like, oh my god, I thought like I had like a good place like to train and like start going, but his school is ran so well, and then he's so patient with everybody. But he also is just so creative when I watch him wrestle, he always is doing something new, but just something with his style to it. And learning about like having your own style. Every wrestler has like their own little niches.
Yep.
And I feel like I definitely learned that part of wrestling from him, where it finally was clicked. Like, I already do some of these things without even thinking about it, but let me add more.
Yeah. No, I think that's really awesome. I mean, like, obviously, Trey's been a big presence on the independent scene for a good while now.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
so,
he's just grown and grown too over like the past couple of years. And his stuff with Impact and opening the training school, I feel like he's just killing the game right now.
oh, no, absolutely. Just definitely is. Kind of touching on that, who were some of like the wrestlers that you kind of thought like, oh, like I'd love to be like them?
Oh, yeah, definitely like Millie McKenzie and Matt DeMorris, and oh my god, they're like my top tier. I love Millie. When I like was first introduced to her, that's like my whole envision. I was like, that's who I want to be. That's who I'm trying to be like. And then Matt DeMorris, I just loved watching his intensity in matches. And he was always very, very creative. Like there's stuff he's done that I'm like, oh my god, how do you come up with this?
Huge shout out to Millie McKenzie. We love Millie McKenzie over here from us.
She is probably my favorite wrestler, and I can't wait for the day we get in the ring together.
Someone that's like watching this right now, just like tweet that out and we'll get that going. Okay. So then in that run up to that first match, like take me through like some of the thoughts, the feelings kind of going into it.
So they told me a couple weeks out, and originally it was going to be me and another girl's debut in a singles match. And then, so they were like, okay, you guys just train together, practice some stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I was very stressed. One, because I'm not being led. I'm basically leading the match, and it's my first one with another girl's first match. And I was like, I have no trust. But I felt like by like the end of that week that I was like, okay, I'm feeling pretty good about it. And then they're like, oh, here's tickets, go sell tickets, blah, blah, blah. So I'm super excited. And so is like my family. So we're giving tickets to everybody, selling a bunch. And I ended up selling so many that my training school was like, hey, you're no longer going to be a pre-show match in your debut match. You're going to be semi-main because you sold too many tickets and we don't want all the crowd to leave once your match is over. And I was like, okay. So
I think that
was
might
like
be the most
stress
indie
put
wrestling
on me.
sentence I've ever heard.
It was like, oh, we came here for her. We're out now. But it was like one of those moments where I was like, crap, I did this to myself. And now we were semi-main of the show, and I felt like there was more pressure. But I was still excited, and I felt prepared at that point. And then they were like, okay, just to help you guys out, we're going to put a more experienced person in there. So then it became a triple threat. And Leslie, like the woman, like led us and was like, okay, this is what you should do. This is what you should do. And I was like, okay, I'm getting it. I understand.
Yeah.
And then day of the show, I just remember like right before my music hit, I was like, okay, I got this. I'm hyped up. And I've never really gotten butterflies or anything before matches. I've only had it once. And it was literally like earlier this year, which is kind of crazy. So I've never had like nerves before a match, and I know that like a lot of people were talking about that when they're like, oh yeah, I'm about to wrestle, I get so nervous. But I think cheerleading burnt out my nerves where I don't like I can't get nervous before performing anymore because I'm like,
yeah.
It's just showtime. We'll figure it out. We
We'll
practiced
just
for
see
this.
how it goes. Like, what happens.
Yes. And I went out and I wrestled. And it's I watch it back down. I'm like, this is so cringy. I hate it.
Yeah.
But like at the time, I like went back. I had my ankle sprained, so I think one of the other girls were carrying me out, and she's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm okay." And I was so blown up. I just remember I couldn't breathe. I was like, "It's over." And it was also very sweet because a lot of my wrestling friends drove down from like Ohio and Indiana to come watch my first match. And I thought that was very sweet. So they made me cry afterwards. I was like, "You son of a gun, you didn't tell me you were coming."
I
So
think
that
I
was
think
my
that's
experience.
yeah, I think that's so awesome, and kind of having that kind of free flowing just like approach to it, and just being like, okay, well, you just, what happens, we'll just let it go, make sure we finish, and then just worry about everything afterwards.
Yes, that is totally my mindset.
I think wrestling needs more of that mindset.
I'm just a very go with the flow type person because I'm like, we'll figure it out. And I feel like a lot of people before their matches are like, it has to happen this way. It has to happen this way.
Yeah.
And I've never like understood that. But I was like, everybody has their own way of doing things. I'm gonna let you do that. The most like terrifying thing to see before a match, I wrestled Alec Price, and before he goes out of the curtain, he just starts chanting and running back and forth. Like, and I'm just watching him, and I'm like, what's he doing? Oh no, oh no. Because you can just feel the intensity on him, and he goes out with so much fire. And I asked him about it. I'm like, why do you do that before every match? And he was like, oh, it's an old football like chant. And
You
I
run
just
into
remember
like the
every
pre-match
time,
rituals of people.
yes. And he would get so fired up. He was like, yeah, every time we did it before a football game, I just remember I would kill it. He was like, so I do it before wrestling because it makes me fired up and I know I'm going to kill it.
I think that's so awesome, though. I think like a little insight just to like how other people, handle it as well. Like, I sometimes am around the music world and I hear about like various people's like pre-show rituals that are like, we all need to like high five everyone behind the show before we go onto the stage and stuff. And it's like, I find it so interesting.
I made fun of Lee Moriarty because during like the Indiana GCW, they ran like an outdoor show, and I was just like chilling, enjoying the show, helping out. And I'm friends with Lee, and he was like, "Hey, can you hold my phone while I do my entrance?" I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Make sure my music doesn't get paused." So apparently, he actually plays music through his headphones when he comes out, and he's like listening to random things while doing his whole entrance. And I found that so interesting. I was like, I love listening to my entrance music on my way to the ring. And this man's like, no, I have to be blasting a
Just get
completely
the
different
headphones on.
song.
No one
Yes.
talk to me.
I thought I was just looking at the music as it was playing. I was like, is he really listening to this while the song is playing? I was just like, what is going on? This isn't right.
Why do you want to touch on this when you said like your first time feeling nervous before a match was just earlier this year? With how things are now and kind of how this journey has gone, do you feel like you have pressure on you when you wrestle?
Um, I always think there's expectations of me every time I wrestle. But I've just gotten used to it. I'm like, I know what people expect of me, and not always. Sometimes I'm like, I'm not gonna give it to them. But other times I will actually be like, okay, this is what people want. Let me be like, let's do this. I've never felt like pressure It's just like I know what people expect, but I'm not going to let that affect me or my work or career.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of like the mindset of like I'm going to focus on me and only me, and not care about everything else surrounding me. As selfish as that sounds, but I think it's the best way to like perform in my mind, so I don't think about other things and get distracted.
Yeah. It's that thing of like knowing when to care and knowing when not to care.
Yes. And I feel like me as a teenager, like it's like school and wrestling, I like relate it sometimes because I'm like thinking about it. I'm like, oh, I'll do my homework, I'll do this. But sometimes I'll be sitting in class and I'm not listening to a single word because it's like I don't care about this. And I was like, I don't need to care about this because all of this is already done. And I feel like it's different for every person. It's different for like what you think of your expectations or what other people are surrounding you.
Mhm.
But I've always been in the mindset of like, if this needs to happen, it will happen.
No, absolutely. Just because I feel like with obviously having that I'm gonna say quite sharp rise and that quite big change to go through, and having all of a sudden having like lots of eyes looking at you at any one moment, and then like things from your matches going out and going online and people seeing them and people commenting and all of that might feel like that might get a bit overwhelming at times. But with how you say like I choose when to care.
And definitely when it comes to social media, sometimes uh, there has been some comments that I've been like, okay, I'm about to reply to this. And luckily that I have like good people around me that are like, don't do that. Don't do that. It's almost out of impulse. I'm like, let me get back.
You gotta have those people that say to you like, no, stop, step back a
And definitely
second.
my mom is one of them. Because there's been times where I'm like, I'll screenshot what I'm about to post, and she's like, don't send that, delete that.
I'm so happy that's a universal experience.
It's like, let us not put more anger or hatred into the world. It's better to ignore things and move on because the internet at the end of the day is so fast moving that things disappear after a couple of days. No matter what it is or what you do, a few people will remember it, but the internet moves so quickly that they're on to the next thing already.
No, absolutely. I feel like I've heard a lot of wrestlers talk about like how they've had to kind of balance and manage that in with like having to be on social media to promote shows and talk about what they're doing, and then just like constantly being hit with stuff and seeing stuff that it's just like it's too much for some people to just like actually normally
Walk away
manage.
from, yeah.
You just say like you can't get away from it.
Social media is a very, very like annoying thing sometimes, but it's also like a gift because you can get your name out there so much quicker.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't even have to leave your home. I can send something out right now, and a few people are going to see it that are in completely different states. And my thing with social media as a wrestler, I think of it as like a platform for my business. I'm like, let me post my things, let me share my friends' things, and I'm getting off. If there's ever a point where I'm like, I don't want to be on social media, I won't be on social media. And definitely during COVID time, there was a point where I'm like not in the right mindset and I was not happy. I was just like going through COVID and like losing my friends. I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. So I took a break. And there's no problem with taking breaks. And I feel like sometimes wrestlers are like, oh no, I'm going to lose my attention that I have right now on the internet. And I was like, you can always get that back. Your mental health is more important.
And I think that is an awesome place to bring this to a finish. Billie, thank you so much for joining us for this first episode. I hope for everyone watching, this has been an amazing insight into the world of what it is like to go through becoming a wrestler. As I said, I've been Dan. This has been Billie Starkz. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next episode.